Hi there, everybody. I'm Jeff Mayers from WizPolitics.com here with another virtual luncheon. Today we have the two minority leaders in the legislature, both Democrats, Senate Minority Leader Janet Bewley and Assembly Minority Leader Gordon Hintz. First, before we get to our guest today, I want to thank our sponsors for this event series. This is part of our Madison Club event series. Normally we would be at the Madison Club, but because of COVID, we have been doing them virtually, and hopefully sometime in the second half of the year, we can get back to doing some live in-person events. But in the meantime, I want to thank our sponsors. Couldn't do without you. Hush Blackwell Strategies, American Family Insurance, Walmart, Xcel Energy, AARP Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Hospital Association. Also want to talk about some upcoming events, virtual luncheons that we're doing on March 11th in cooperation with the Milwaukee Press Club, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, Democrat of Milwaukee, and a member of the Ways and Means Committee. Probably be talking a lot about the federal COVID bill that's now in the Senate. March 25th, WisBusiness.com, that's a sister site of ours and a sister subscriber service of ours. We're going to be doing a program on the hospitality industry and how it's been coping with COVID and how it sees the future. April 15th, a Madison Club event again, part of our legislative leadership series. We'll have the new Senate Majority Leader, Devin LeMahieu. But today, we have the Democratic leaders in the state legislature. Welcome, Senator Bewley and Representative Hintz. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks so much for having us.
Happy to be here.
So before we get into the budget and all this stuff at the Capitol, this is a time, personally, I'm reflecting on a year into the COVID mess that has struck Wisconsin and the nation and the world. And, about March of last year was when the first lockdowns and orders started to happen here in Wisconsin. And I guess I just wanted to hear, from you folks personally and, your districts, because, Senator, your district's way up north and you're in the Valley, Representative Hintz. So, what do you remember from mid-March of last year? Let's just start with you, Senator.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be able to talk with you and answer the questions. Truly, the very first thing I thought about was how isolated northern Wisconsin is, and are we going to be able to get to the people the things that they could need that would be upcoming. We had no idea how far in the future we were going to look, but everything for northern Wisconsin, and I do represent the northern, really Lake Superior, it's north, everything is further away. We are sparsely settled, and we have less resources to count on. But then very soon after that, I realized the entire state is different. There's circumstances, issues, people that have different kinds of jobs, that travel in different ways. Are we going to have the organized capacity all the way from the federal level, all the way down to the local counties that will be able to respond to this? Truly, that was the very first thing that I thought of. Logistically, are we going to be able to keep people safe?
How did it affect you, Senator?
Well, I live out in the country. And so on one hand, I felt somewhat sheltered. But on the other hand, I realized that, oh my God, if I ever needed help, it might be difficult to get. But then again, that is the exact example of, for every person, they need to count on their neighbors, local units of government, the facilities, whatever. Everybody needs to count on at least something being there to help them. And I know that after we've gone through this year, we realized that access to help is inconsistent in our state.
Okay. By the way, before I go to Representative Hintz, I want to plug something we have at our site at WisPolitics.com. We have a daily COVID timeline dating back from early in 2020. So you can either relive the nightmare or go back to the details there, very detailed timeline. Anyway, Representative Hintz, what do you remember about mid-March of last year?
just how quickly everything changed. I think the day, March 11th seems to be the reality day that I remember. I think that's when the NBA canceled their season. I got a speeding ticket in Rosendale. The world was off kilter there. My first one, I mean, so.
Oh, right, yeah.
Trust me. But I mean, there's nobody that hasn't been impacted, and there are people that have been impacted dramatically more. But I thought about how difficult it was going to be to explain to people who've lived life one way that things were changing, and the measures that were going to be needed in place were going to alter and dramatically change things, and how managing expectations was going to be important. And I do think one of, not so much for political reasons, but not having a leadership centralized trusted voice at the federal level certainly made things harder, and then sort of allowed people to get to the polarized place or the different perspective place that they are today. Personally, I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I didn't have many of the school issues, but we didn't interact. We've been kind of on lockdown at home. I feel more fortunate than a lot of folks, but I think, as Senator Bewley said, it also exacerbated some of the shortcomings that we already have with broadband, especially when we went to virtual education, with just healthcare and proximity to facilities, the importance to continue to extend telehealth and other things. We saw so many things that were existing disparities all throughout the state, I think, that were highlighted even more. But it's, a lot of people did, I think, band together and recognize the importance and the endurance of trying to grind this out. And I think we're in a place now where, with the light at the end of the tunnel, I think there's hopefully some added resiliency, but everybody has been disrupted, and clearly our ability to do our job, which is very in-person, social in nature, has had consequences as well. But I think what I remember from a year ago mostly is sort of the uncertainty of what we knew about things, and the challenge of managing expectations and communicating to the public the seriousness of what's happening, and what we were going to ultimately need to do and why.
Okay, I just want to stay with Representative Hintz here. So where do you think we are now? You said light at the end of the tunnel, but but I mean, do you think we're in a much better place, and we have a better grip on managing this and future crises and the economy? And I mean, how are you feeling, and how are people in your district feeling about that?
Well, I think we reflect a lot of the country. People have different views, largely based upon how they've been impacted. There's a lot of misinformation out there. You had a president who at the time really minimized the seriousness of it, was dismissive of it. Those things certainly exist among some of the population. But I think we can see that with the advent of the vaccines, people getting vaccinated, they can imagine a summer that is more normal. I don't think that we're going to have a switch where we're all sudden, I think some things will be changed forever. But the one thing that strikes me is that the economy is booming in 70% of the sectors that are out there. We've had a really disproportionate economic recession and impact due to COVID in hospitality, in gyms, in childcare, in restaurants and bars. But in other places, there's actually been an increase of economic activity. I think there's a lot of fatigue out there. And people's reactions, even if you don't like them, I think are understandable and rational at times, given just how hard this has been to contemplate. But I think the lack of the federal government response made it harder. I think sometimes when I get critical or frustrated, I realize that all of this has been hard at the local level, at the state level. I do think DHS has done a great job, especially with the vaccine rollout administration, given kind of how slow things were at the federal level to start. But we're not out of the woods yet. And I think we need to continue to, advocate for the investments that are needed now, the economic recovery that is probably going to lag the public health recovery, and then get back to making investments in the things that matter. And, we'll talk a bit about it, but I think governor's budget really does that.
Okay, Senator Bewley, how would you assess where we are now and how your district is feeling?
Well, I think first of all, the fact that we have vaccines has changed the way people look at their circumstances considerably, because having a vaccine means I can move forward. If I'm vaccinated and my neighbors are, there is going to be a way to return to society. I think too that when we're talking about where we are today compared to where we were when this first started a year ago, I wish there would have been a way that we could have truly resisted having COVID become partisan. It seemed that those who like to divide things jumped on COVID and said, let's make this a way to split the country also. And I believe the way we would have navigated through it would have been very different if there wasn't this one interpretation as opposed to another. That's very hard. People want to know that they can have faith in what they're being told. And when they don't, it's very uncomfortable. There's always second guessing, and then people start to mistrust. And we need as a society to be able to trust and move forward with confidence. So I think that we're at a point now that there's a sense that the wheels are turning, that we are getting through it, and we're going to get beyond it now. I think some of that did coincide with a change in administration in Washington, and that there is a belief that we have the wherewithal to get it done if we do it together, and if we just keep doing it. We're not all going to do it identically, but that there are accepted things that we can all believe in and move forward. We need to have faith in the common understanding of what disease is and how we get better.
Okay, what about schools? In your district, Senator, are most schools in person or virtual?
Well, I think very much like the state, it is up to the local schools, and I believe they make the decisions based upon what they are physically able to do. If they can be open, if they have what they need in order to welcome students safely, I'm sure they're doing it. And if they don't have what they need to welcome students safely and protect teachers, they are making the choices to do things differently. I think that every day we're getting closer, especially now that teachers are going to get vaccines. More and more schools are going to put together those elements so that they will get back to school. I don't think there's a question that getting back to in-person education is a goal we all want. I believe that where we may have a little bit of challenge is what is it that makes it safe? But we're heading there. We're getting there, and every day more and more schools are going to full in person.
Okay, what about your district, Representative Hintz? Are most schools in person or hybrid or virtual?
Yeah, so Oshkosh Public Schools only recently in the last few weeks, reopened to in-person instruction. We began the year when a lot of our neighboring districts did not, meaning last September, with in-person instruction, with the goal of going as long as possible so that kids could meet with their teachers and really prepare for virtual education. Went virtual after that. But, and it's been a challenge, obviously, and a lot of the concerns that are out there about what the impact is, given how reliant we are on schools to provide so many things beyond education, I think are real. A lot of parents, especially those who both work, lives were disrupted as their schedule and employment changed. I know that a lot of the job loss is primarily among women who may be also the caretakers of their kids. But we know more now, right? I mean, I think that was part of the challenge when you think back to where we were in the fall about what the impact was on schools. Can you do it safely? Can you do it not? The impact of masks and PPE on being able to protect people. But every school district's different. I mean, we know that buildings that are able to open windows or adequately change their HVAC systems to allow for more ventilation, and maybe one of the most important things. And Oshkosh has a school that was built 10 years after the Civil War ended. Who knows? Maybe the ventilation's better because it's older. But again, so there's this one size fits all. We all want kids to be back in school in-person education because that is what we view as normal. That's what we view as best for kids. But I don't think you can mandate it or force it or pick arbitrary dates when the condition on the ground is very different. Their resources are different. The density of their population, is different. And I think that those are the things that are often overlooked by people who just want it over or want this one size fits all. But I understand the frustration and the fatigue that a lot of parents have, and this has been incredibly difficult. But all of us want the same thing, and I'm hopeful that if people take it upon themselves to look out for others, continue to wear a mask and get vaccinated, we'll finish the year strong, but hopefully be set up for a pretty normal in-person education experience in September.
All right, let's just stay with you, Representative Hintz. Kind of the news of the day in the political world, at least, is it's about elections. Sort of replaying some of the debate about what happened in the fall. So you have House Democrats passing a sweeping measure that's seen as a counter to what's going on in state houses, including Wisconsin's, from actions by Republicans or proposals by Republicans to change election law. And then you have here the joint in the legislature, the Joint Administrative Rules Committee controlled by Republicans, leaning on and pressuring the Elections Commission on certain issues. So I guess, what do you think of what the Administrative Rules Committee is doing? And then, with Governor Evers there, I don't think any of these things are going to change, but the Administrative Rules Committee could create havoc, I think, for the Elections Commission, correct?
Yes, and I think the most disappointing thing is after this exhausting review, exercise, investigation, look, the verdict was that these claims by the president, the big lie, the things that led to the insurrection on January 6th, weren't true. I mean, by all accounts, in Wisconsin, our elections are well run. Our results are extremely accurate. The work done at the Elections Commission and by clerks around the state, even under challenging circumstances, were administered well. They were prepared for absentee voting. They were prepared for cybersecurity measures after the 2016 experience. If we're going to make things more secure, and if it's really about integrity, they probably could use some more resources. I think that 2020 will be looked back at as a year that we realize that election administration and public health are things that have been severely neglected. We've had recounts in 2011 and 2016 that verified the results on the ground. Nothing that the Republicans are bringing up was, illegal. But it seems to be that the decision that's being made here is that President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, that there's enough people that believe the big lie, and they're going to continue to perpetuate it by putting proposals out there that are aimed at changing this and making it harder for people to vote. What the House Democrats did yesterday in passing their bill was to address what it would take to make it easier to vote for all people around the country, to remove these barriers in a way that maintains access to our system for all people in a safe and accountable way. And it's a very big contrast with what I think there's been more than 230 bills I saw in state legislatures around the country that have been introduced in response to the big lie.
Okay, so Senator Bewley, your Republican colleague, Senator Noss, leading the charge at the Joint Administrative Rules Committee. Do you have faith in the Elections Commission, and what do you think of what the Administrative Rules Committee is doing?
Well, I think just to say, do you have faith in the Elections Commission? I mean, to me, government is one of those things that we should already have the confidence of the people. Of course, I have faith in the Elections Commission. We're supposed to, and I believe that it has demonstrated time and time and time again that there is no reason to doubt. I think it was interesting as you were posing the questions that you were giving to the minority leader, you ended by saying that this would create havoc. I believe that's the goal right now for the Republicans, because they know that these bills won't pass, that they'll get vetoed. Why are they doing this? It is a shiny object to deter people away from thinking about the serious things that we have right now. It's to try to continue to put forth this lie, this confusion that our election systems are corrupt. And worst of all, it is meant to intimidate people and to prevent people from having access to a fair vote. So I just believe they're wrong for doing it. They're not going to accomplish it. Let's get on with the really important business of the state and get to work, pass the things we need to do. Let's get to work on the budget, but we just can't be distracted by things that do not need to be done and are fixing a problem that doesn't exist.
Okay, just follow up, Senator Bewley. I guess one of the themes, though, in terms of the Elections Commission is they're filling in the blanks. They're allowing too much leeway at the local clerk level. So most of the criticism is directed certainly at the Democratic clerks in Milwaukee and Dane counties. But should these things be ironclad, or should local clerks have wiggle room on some of these things?
You know, I think that just to suggest that we would use the term wiggle room in an election is something that would make people uncomfortable.
Okay, sorry about that, but I
That's
mean,
all right.
I guess flexibility then to use.
Right. Well, I think that there are parameters that election workers have been doing, particularly those that are holding an office in their counties. They know what they are able to do, and they should be allowed to exercise their duties. And I do not think that we need to change the kinds of decision-making moments that they do. And we have no reason to believe that there's any malicious intent suddenly being inserted into the jobs that they do. As a matter of fact, I think that the clerks are some of the backbone of democracy. They are truly doing something. They're upholding a precious right that we have in our country, and they take their work very seriously. They take their work very seriously. And I think to continue to infer that in some way these dedicated people are doing something wrong, again, it's distracting, but it's also shameful. We have had, again, audit after audit, count after count. There's nothing there that says anything has been done incorrectly. We need to believe that the system is working, and we do not need to have the energy and the effort dedicated to try to convince people that there's something wrong. That's not the role of public service.
Okay, well, let's turn to the governor's budget now. The biggest thing that happens at the beginning of every session is the budget. The governor introduced his budget, and Republicans, majority Republicans sort of indicated the biggest, most visible pieces of it are dead on arrival. So what's the fate of the governor's budget, Senator?
Well, what else are the Republicans say except it's dead on arrival? I mean, what else are they going to say? I think one of the most important things is that the governor has laid out a budget that represents the people of the state, and now they can look at it and they can say, this is what the governor wants, and this is what our state deserves to have. What the Republicans aren't saying, and what they mean is they want to do their own budget, and that somehow what they're going to do is going to be much better than this thing that the governor did. But the people will be able to see the differences. They will be able to see what the important things that the governor realizes are extremely important for our state that the Republicans don't want to do. They don't, healthcare, education, the university system, getting businesses back on their feet, social justice. These are things the Republicans don't want to do. I think the governor has laid out a very good, very good blueprint. And the other thing that I want to point out is that we now, whether or not people are ready for it, we are in a political environment that can include compromise. We never had that before. I mean, we're only into like year 3 of this crazy new world where we can compromise. And I think that we're starting to get to use it. We started off, we have some bills we passed on a compromise basis. We can do that with the budget. I think the governor has just laid out such a good blueprint that we are going to be able to work from it, I believe, because again, it's the people's budget.
Okay, Representative Hinz, 2 years ago, just remind people, the last budget, Governor Evers signed the Republican version of the budget. He vetoed some things, but he signed the Republican version of the budget. So I guess there was some forced compromise there. Could this play out the same way this cycle, or what do you see happening?
Well, I'm hopeful. Well, I should say, I believe, as Senator Bewley said, there's the opportunity for compromise just because that's how things should work. I'm not that encouraged that it seems to be ever since Governor Evers was elected as a Democrat in 2018, before he's even sworn in, the position seems to be obstructionist, to not allow him to pass his initiatives. And that seems to be the approach taken heading into this session. That being said, Governor Evers' budget, by what it invested in, the popularity of what he proposed, moved Republicans, and I was on finance under Governor Walker, well beyond anything that they could have done under Governor Walker, and that's what was included in the final budget. I think once again, Governor Evers has introduced a budget, albeit in different times, that addresses both the remaining challenges of COVID, recognizes the economic recovery that's going to be needed, but also finds a way to invest in a future for all Wisconsinites and doesn't ignore the problems that we have. I'll quote Governor Evers because, in his budget address, he said, "You can disagree with me if you want, but don't punish the people we serve so you can settle a score no one but you is keeping." And I think that was his acknowledgement that, look, if you oppose me or you're trying to, make me fail, or if you're thinking about the next election, don't take it out on the people of Wisconsin. I mean, there is a way to find a middle ground on this budget that we should all be working towards. And again, Governor Evers, a budget is about priorities. He has made significant investments in a lot of priorities that the public wants, that the public needs. If the Republicans have concerns with that, they should decide, well, what are their priorities, right? We've heard a lot of vague, general, spends too much, it does this. Well, what are their ideas? What do they think we shouldn't invest? Is childcare not a priority for them? Is broadband not a priority? Do they think investing in education isn't important? We don't hear a lot of that. And I think that's really where the debate is going to hinge upon, is what do they think that we should not invest in that's in the governor's budget?
All right, well, let's go to some audience questions here. And then at the end, maybe I'll come back to some brilliant question that I haven't asked. But I've got a long list and I'll try to do my best. But there's a couple questions here about legalizing marijuana. That's a very big part of, again, that's one of the lightning rods of the budget. Governor proposed legalizing medicinal marijuana in budget 1. Budget 2 wants to legalize recreational marijuana. The Joint Finance co-chairs have already signaled that that's not happening through the budget process. But I do wonder, let's talk about, could medicinal marijuana pass as a separate bill somehow? That's I'm paraphrasing about 3 or 4 questions from the audience. Could medicinal marijuana pass as a standalone bill? Is that possible? Do you see that happening, Senator Bewley?
I do. That could pass. That could pass. I think that, nationwide, this is something that all states are going to deal with. And I think that we can approach it from the way the governor did, which is to put it in the budget with all the different aspects and ways. But we could consider it. I think the medical marijuana portion of it is the one that we all know is widely accepted by, I heard 80% of the people of Wisconsin are in favor of that. I believe it could pass as a standalone, but for now it's in the budget in a larger form. But you know, we will be seeing something happen on marijuana in the future.
Well, if we had direct referendum process, I'm sure it would have passed already. But anyway, Representative Hintz, do you see a standalone medicinal marijuana bill passing?
I don't know that I see it passing. Perhaps I see it getting further along. I know that I've talked to some of my Republican colleagues, both some who are more libertarian in nature, some who just recognize the benefits of medicinal marijuana, and certainly see and hear the public support. I'm an incrementalist in being reasonable. If we can get a hearing on it, answer some questions, maybe explain to folks who don't understand, then we can get further and maybe we can get there. But it's up to the legislature to decide that we want to join the majority of states out there, that we want to, recognize that the public overwhelmingly wants this, and that attitudes and responses are changing. I think all of our neighboring states, I believe, have some form of legal marijuana, full recreational in Illinois. And I think the governor has recognized this in proposing a plan that regulates and taxes, much like we do with alcohol, that in many ways has many more benefits than costs, and makes for a safer, more regulated experience. So, I'm glad that he's put it out there. I think just the proposal alone accelerates the discussion, and I think we will eventually get there. I just don't know if it's going to be in the next 6 months or in the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, on that, Representative Hintz, I mean, if the budget were a lot tighter, if there wasn't a surplus, if there wasn't a lot of federal money coming down the track, this 165 million in the second year might look look more appealing than it does, I think, maybe. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of money and the revenue is nothing to sneeze at, but I don't think that's the reason that you do it. In other words, I think there are considerations. There are things that there are costs and considerations that we are going to want to make in either proposal, both in terms of consulting doctors who may not, recognize or be educated in the prescription or things. I think there's feedback based on my experience in talking with the medical society, but also, with full legalization, something that there's a public education component that I think needs to come along with it. I've talked to Colorado officials and they said, if they were to roll it out now, that would be the big thing that they would do. That there's still a lot of people in the state that have had no exposure, no understanding to who the proposal just sounds, so radical based on their 11th grade health class in the early 70s. And I think maybe that's something that's plaguing. I mean, I would put maybe some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in that group.
You mean like the old Reefer Madness
That's right.
video? Okay. Okay. So Senator Bewley, here's a question about, and this pertains also to the race for school superintendent on April 6th. What is your thought on continued expansion of vouchers and the impact they have on public schools?
Well, I think that, Wisconsin's goal is to provide a public education to all students. And I think that is a noble and a very doable job. Every time you try to pull a chunk of people away, it reduces the efficiency of the total. And I think that we understand that there are some things that we do via charters. There are some things that we do with alternative education opportunities, but to simply say that we are going to take public money and divert it to a private school is not something that we should continue to promote as an alternative throughout the state. It began as a solution to a problem in Milwaukee. That was the goal, a solution to a problem. I wasn't there, so I can't say exactly if that was the right solution or if the problem was such that it could be fixed by vouchers, but it was never intended to be a policy that would go statewide. We don't need vouchers in other parts of the state as a solution to a problem. So I do not believe in the expansion of vouchers. I do not believe that it should be a component of the way that we use public dollars to educate our kids.
By the way, have you endorsed in this DPI race yet? Senator
Jill,
Bueller?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so you're for Underly, the
Yes.
I guess I call her in this respect, the anti-voucher candidate, anti-private voucher candidate.
If you have to make it, one or the other, I guess, but
But there's more to
I
her
like her for
candidacy.
lots
than-
of reasons.
Yeah. But in this context of this discussion, okay, Representative Hintz, what about, I mean, we saw an expansion under total Republican rule at the State House. So, and Governor Evers wants to trim that back a little bit. So what are your thoughts on continuing expansion of vouchers and their impact on public schools?
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes that the Republican legislature made under Governor Walker, and I was on finance at the time, when they initially expanded beyond Milwaukee and added Racine and even added the initial statewide, it was going to be state funded. In other words, state taxpayers were going to fund and hold harmless, although you could say that that money would be less money for public schools. When they didn't have the money to expand it, they put it on local property taxpayers. So now we have local property taxpayers paying, in many cases, to fund kids that were privately paying on their own. We haven't seen a study in a while, but initially, I believe it was DPI put out that the majority of new enrollees with the voucher expansion program were people who were already attending public school. So there was no new benefit. We were just now subsidizing private pay. The private schools in Oshkosh that are in the voucher program are great schools. I visit them, but they, that choice is available for parents who want to make those investments. Taxpayers certainly shouldn't be doing that. And by pitting them against public schools, and that's what you do when you're putting it on property taxes, we have to increase property taxes, and that money is money that otherwise could be going to public schools. And the fact that it increases and expands year after year until the cap is unlimited, I think is why Governor Evers is proposing a pause on the growth, because we've got a policy that is unsustainable where taxpayers are paying for two systems. I think there are a lot of questions still on accountability, although that has been improved a little bit. But this is not, you would never design an education system like this. And I'm afraid that ideology is still driving too much of the politics of this. And while it may sound appealing, we don't have the resources for this. And, in addition to taking property tax dollars away from public schools, remember, public schools are also responsible for paying for things like the transportation costs of these students. So if a private school district starts 3 weeks earlier, taxpayers are paying for that transportation, even though public school students aren't even in there. And those are the things that we hear from administrators throughout the state. And if we fall short on funding, this is one of the drains that we know that's out there.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you, Representative Hintz. Here's a question. What can be done to finish the job and get the remaining personal property tax eliminated in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, if we were to design a tax system in the state, I don't think we would ever have included the personal property tax. And this is one of those challenges, especially when we look at what the impact on local government is, that there's a lot of support for repealing the personal property tax, but we would have to find a way to make revenue whole for local governments. We already know that we're over dependent on the property tax, and taking this income source away without providing stable revenue that will be there, in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years, when the state has broken its promises before, I think is something that needs to be answered. And remember, there were TIFs that were created in these communities, 5-10 years ago that relies on the revenue generated from those personal property taxes, some of them overdependent. So I think there needs to be a serious discussion of what the consequences are, especially when we don't allow for those sources for local revenue options. And, people that are promoting the personal property tax repeal probably want to get behind some of the governor's proposals for local option revenues.
Okay, so what's your view on this, Senator Bueller? Or what's your caucus been thinking about on getting rid of the personal property tax? And I guess what Representative Hintz also brings in the local tax option.
Well, I think that, the personal property tax bill is pretty much the only itemized tax bill that a resident receives. I mean, we don't get a receipt for our state income tax and see where it goes. God forbid, because then people would want to pull it all apart and say, I'll pay for that, but not for that. I do believe if we go to having the personal property tax removed, we do have to figure out a way to make the communities whole so that they do not lose that revenue. Because in fact, when local units of government do not have a way to get revenue, when they're frozen, and the only thing they can do is go to referendum and increase their own property taxes, they are without the ability to get revenue. So, we need to look at new ways to get revenue. And I believe that, this deserves a very thorough and thoughtful look, because as soon as we say the word taxes, it's as if I don't want it. We have to cut them. And that's just the automatic kind of almost biological response. Cut them. Well, we can't. We need revenue. That's how we pay for the services that the state provides. And it's a matter of making sure they're fair. I think that everyone would say, if I believed I was paying my fair share, I'd be okay. But if I believe that somehow somebody else is not paying their fair share, that's the hardest part of all. We have to be able to let people know that we're not letting others off, particularly the wealthy. That's really, really hard when hardworking people see all of the tax deductions that are only available to higher earners. I think that much like elections, people need to believe that taxation is fair. And when, again, with personal property on a property tax bill, they want to know what it's for. Take it away, make it whole. I'm not wedded to any one solution. I just want people to believe that what they are paying in taxes is fair, is reasonable, and they are getting a good return on what they provide to the government through taxes.
Okay, here's a question. We can stay with you, Senator Bewley, on the minimum wage. It looks like it cannot be in the U.S. Senate version of the COVID relief bill, and Governor Evers proposed a little over a $10, upping it from about $7 to up to $10. And this questioner says it's very, very popular. How will Dems in both the Assembly and Senate deal with that? And how does it relate to your electoral program in 2022?
Well, let's take the electoral program in 2022 off and talk about today for the moment, because I know that this is an issue very, very close to people's hearts. We need to do something about the minimum wage, period. We need to do it. And I understand completely there are complexities in certain areas regarding tipped employees, and we can figure those things out. I know we can. There is also this very sharp reluctance to going straight to 15. I think that I wish we could, but we won't. That's not what the governor is proposing. I think that what the governor proposes is kind of just right. That's the best temperature of the porridge bowl. And I think it's a very good way to do it. It allows for different portions of the economy who have a different way of paying employees to see some flexibility. It allows for younger people. There's a lot of things in it that I believe makes sense. And again, I think I'm in favor of it.
You're in favor of the governor's proposal,
Yes.
Which is
Yeah.
under
If I were to speak for the caucus, I would say that some of them would prefer the full 15. But again, we are a caucus and we discuss things, and we know that not everybody is going to get exactly what we want, but heck, we get what we need. And I think that this is what we need.
Okay, Representative Hintz, what's your view on the $15 an hour minimum wage and the governor's proposal, and what's the possible fate of that in the budget?
Well, it doesn't sound like the like the fate is looking that good. But look, it is crazy to me that Wisconsin hasn't raised the minimum wage since before I was in the legislature, I think in the 05-06 session. And one of the damaging things that they did in there was to, preempt local governments from being able to have their own minimum wage increases, because we do have regional cost disparities around the state that I think would be definitely utilized and enacted around the state in different communities who recognize that a disproportionate amount of jobs in their community are in sectors that keep them below what a living wage should be. So I think the governor in this budget and in his previous budget have again put the infrastructure in place to have that discussion where we move our way towards restoring the minimum wage to be something meaningful, to recognize the change in inflation that has taken place and how what the minimum wage was in the 70s is so much less than what it is now. And yet we have an entire economy where there's a growing service sector where these are the jobs that are out there that in places that have increased the minimum wage have led to less turnover and to more benefit, that you can have a sustainable career in some of these fields that they enjoy. And so incrementally increasing the minimum wage, I mean, if I understand 15, I have questions and cautions based on regional disparities in my own area on what 15 would mean. But at the federal level, you're already seeing some Republicans that are not at 15, but they certainly support a minimum wage increase. And I think that's what I would like to see at the state level. If not what the governor is proposing, what is the opposition to increasing the minimum wage, that we know would benefit tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers, not just those that are at the minimum wage, but who are near the minimum wage, that certainly would benefit from that ripple effect increase. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. I believe the average age of a minimum wage earner is 35. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, I think misses, that's not included in the opposition arguments that much. So hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation, and perhaps like marijuana, we can get some minimum wage increase and at least a discussion of removing that preemption.
All right, I think this question is basically for you, Representative Hinskens. This is kind of something that that you have been talking about a lot, is Foxconn. So Foxconn has announced its has an agreement with a electric vehicle company, and hinting, I guess, that it could be taking place in Wisconsin, that manufacture that could be taking place in Wisconsin. And your view of that is?
It's hard to take the company seriously at this point. Ventilators, coffee makers, $100 million to the UW system, innovation centers, Generation 6, Generation 10.5, 8K ecosystem. The reality, it's been, I hate to say this, you guys, it's been almost 4 years. The state's been played. I mean, this was a company whose goal was to maintain favorable trade status. Hey, let's pretend we're building something in the Speaker Ryan's district in a swing state for the president. That being said, I don't know. I mean, both the reputation of the company and I think Fisker's reputation makes it seem unlikely that there's going to be a car built anytime. And I think it's a little bit of a distraction, because I want to see something happen there. And I think there is probably some viable project, but it is about managing expectations and not chasing this idea that we're going to build a electric car factory, or that we're going to make these screens there and have 13,000 people. I mean, there's an incredible parcel of property that has been assembled in a major corridor. We have 2 Research One universities in this state. I think there has to be a viable project that's there, but the scale of it may look nothing like was originally promised. It may be more knowledge-based, research-based, technology development that may only employ a couple hundred people, but that is a benefit to the state. Nothing close to whatever was sold is going to happen. And I don't want to see it fail, but I think success looks a lot different, and managing our expectations is going to be important. But I mean, these headlines are a distraction. The company seems to do this every 3 months, and then there's another humiliating expose of a warehouse with guys driving around in golf carts, and it's a joke. And
Okay, well then why should the state be trying to renegotiate a deal? We haven't paid them much, so why don't we just, what's the point of renegotiating with them?
well, one, I think the existing contract is they're not eligible for anything under the existing contract. That's dead. And I don't think the legislature is going to pass new enabling legislation. I think the conversations between the WEDC and Foxconn right now are the same ones that any business in Wisconsin can engage in relating to enterprise zones. That's the kind of things that they are talking about. And those credits are, I think, still generous, but only for projects that are viable. And they are nowhere near as costly as the cash payments that were included for Foxconn. So the state they'd like to see, WEDC, Governor Evers would like to see a viable project, but they're not going to give away the farm. And there's already been close to $100 million of, either through utility rates or local government money or some of the state infrastructure support spent. That's a pretty good deal for a company already. They've already received that.
Okay. I'm going to finish off with sort of a theme here. There's probably 4 or 5 questions about this very thing. And one of them, Senator Bewley, I'm going to go to you first. It was about, setting up an electoral program for 2022. Obviously, a lot of these questioners are frustrated at, the minority status of Democrats. Senator, the Republican majority increased in the Senate, decreased slightly in the Assembly. But a lot of the questions are, how are Democrats going to speak to rural Democrats? How are Democrats going to get back in the majority? What's the electoral agenda that's going to help Democrats win or start getting back on track in 2022? So, Senator
all
Bewley.
I can say is, all right, here's what I'd love to talk about. We have a great opportunity at this point. We have certain moments that are happening in history. One, of course, is redistricting. And then also we have the major cracks in the foundation of the Republican Party. The Democrats have the message that, if communicated with genuineness, will reach a lot of people. And we are going to put that message out without saying, okay, this is for you. We're going to say, you person who used to support Trump, this is why you should be a Democrat. Or you who think that you're Republican and rethinking it. No, we see a whole population throughout the state, particularly in the rural areas, as you mentioned, that are rethinking how they voted and why. And what is it that they really want to have out of the people who represent them? Because they've been given a lot of different versions of what representation is. And I think that a lot of people are ready to go back to, tell me what you believe, what are your values? Do you share are we kind of copacetic here? And then they'll vote for them. And then I truly believe that that is a moment for Democrats, because we do go to the heart of what people are saying and feeling. And we know that there is a lot of discontent. A lot of people are very unsure about whether or not they're even a Republican anymore. And we are going to let them know that we have a nice big tent.
What do you think is it? What issue is it? Is it economy, healthcare, education, some combination? What is it?
Well, I believe, and I don't mean to be glib by saying that it's all of it, but it's the ability to have a government that you can believe in. It's the ability to know that I'm electing a person, that person is going to talk to me straight, that person is going to listen to me and represent me, and I'm not going to be surprised or have to make a vow to be in this group. I just want government. I just want to go back to where I vote for somebody who tells me what they think, and then they go and do it. Very simple.
Okay,
And
sounds-
that's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, that sounds a lot like, you got to get the right candidate too, the candidate recruitment portion of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are going to be working very hard on that. And there are, interesting, you would think that there are not people who would want to enter politics at this time, but that's not true. People are really saying, I want to do something because they see all the versions of what have happened when people get elected and what they turn into. They turn into something else. And people all really want to say, no, I elected you to represent me. And you're not doing that. So I think that this is a great time, a very good time for Democrats.
Okay, Representative Hinch, you're going to have the last word on, how does you can speak for your house or Democrats at large, win in rural Wisconsin and win back one of the houses?
Well, I mean, I'm a Democrat because I believe government has a role to play in expanding opportunity in people's lives. And I think that's the same kind of message that makes me think stubbornly that we've got something to sell to all voters. I never write off any part of the state. And I think, our off year is going to be focused on engaging people around the state, building the kind of infrastructure for the long term. I think Senator Bewley hit it on the head, is that there's, trust in government, is at an all-time low. All government, all sides. I mean, part of the reason I think President Trump had appealed to voters is because he wanted to burn it all down, from people who didn't, hear that anything from both sides that was going to amount to anything because they had been let down. They saw a system that was not built for them, that had left them behind. And, that brand out there still has some appeal. But I think President Biden recognizes that. I think that's why you hear the discussions about this recovery plan, not just trying to address COVID, but to make sure that we get past the pandemic in a better place, where we can remind folks about the role that government plays in building the infrastructure and in creating that opportunity that I started off by mentioning. But look, I'm not going to ignore the demographics. I look at numbers all the time. I see the trends where we're picking up seats, what happened in Georgia and Arizona related to more suburban voters, more women, and those are certainly going to be opportunities, but I don't think we're going to be writing off any part of the state. And I still think that we have a winning message for people, and looking at where Republicans at the state level and national level, doubling down on the same sort of divisive, ineffective, rhetoric, while also adding to the swamp, wasting taxpayer money, looking out for the wealthy, I think are things that aren't going to age well and are going to give us an opportunity to contrast that. But at the state level, I'll be honest with you, a lot of politics have been nationalized. In a lot of our communities, there is no local media. There's no coverage of state issues. And that's one of the big challenges is, that national politics is on TV, it's on the radio, and people can follow that. And sometimes that impacts their partisan brand, not as Wisconsin specific. So I think the governor getting out there, selling his budget around the state, reminding people about the programs that are there that impact people on the ground is an important part for us to kind of figure out. How does state government impact people, and how can we remind folks of the distinction, that Democrats have as a brand in Wisconsin that may be perhaps different than some of our coastal Democrats?
Yeah, but I didn't hear, maybe I missed it and I'm sorry, but I didn't hear either of you really say, well, we got to have a program for rural Democrats, appealing to rural Democrats. You seem to be shying away from that kind of thing, Representative.
I mean, not at all. I mean, look, President Biden had like 35 pages worth of a rural prosperity agenda. We have been advocating for, expanded broadband, for the expansion of the UW extension program, for marketing of, Wisconsin produced produce in our schools, things that we can do. But it's not just about policy. Again, when people don't trust government, they don't believe in their government, they don't believe that they're valued, all the programs and policy proposals in the world, aren't going to be able to immediately overcome that. It is about how we talk to people. It is about listening. It is about recognizing and reminding them that throughout history, government, while providing value and being effective, has demonstrated that it does have the ability to raise all boats and to create an economy and support an economy that works.
Okay, well, great. We have now run out of time. Thank you, audience, for your questions. I want to thank the two leaders, of course, Senator Bewley and Representative Hintz. Want to thank our sponsors for this Madison Club series. Hush Blackwell Strategies, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, XL Energy, and American Family Insurance. Our next program will be in association with the Milwaukee Press Club on March 11th with Congresswoman Gwen Moore. So thank you, leaders, and thank you, audience. This is Jeff Mayer signing off. Until next time.